Here's a question for you. Would you watch an ad to play Game Pass for free? It's an interesting question, really, because content and ads really have gone hand in hand together for a long time. If you think about it, you more than likely watched an ad potentially before this video played or before some other video on YouTube. There's been billboards, and we've also seen a lot of ads on mobiles, right? You download a mobile game, it's like, hey, you can pay X amount of dollars, or you can watch this ad before you play a little bit of the game. So the question becomes, is like, would you watch an ad before playing Game Pass? It's something Microsoft is exploring and something I bet we would see. At the end of the day, Game Pass is a subscription. It does have a giant catalog, and Microsoft is very interested in getting more people into that funnel. The question becomes is, does Microsoft really want to become an advertising juggernaut? I mean, realistically, they already are, right? They have LinkedIn, they have Bing, they have many other ways. So funneling ads into Xbox content is something Microsoft is exploring. Now, this slide, which was dug up by TweakTown, comes from CFO Tim Stewart of Xbox, and was at I believe the Wells Fargo thing that happened last month, and that stuff's been transcribed and now being blasted everywhere. And so this slide here is super interesting. Initially, I was thinking this was like a forward-looking slide. I got all excited, but then I kind of really dug into it and realized, hey, this is actually all just stuff that has already happened. So starting on the left side here, the phase 1 adoption, we all remember those dollar trials. It's like, hey, get in, get easy. And more importantly, you likely remember those mega deals that Microsoft had where you could take any amount of months of game or Xbox Live Gold, rest in peace, and convert it over into Game Pass up to like 36 months. And I know many people, myself included, did that. Just bought a whole bunch of gold, rolled it on over. And so Microsoft got me into Game Pass. And that really just becomes that unbeatable value, that dollar trial. And so Microsoft is through that early adoption phase. And now they're in somewhere between phase 2 and phase 3. There's growth and retention and also maximizing returns. The interesting thing here about this growth and retention side is actually the listing of 400 plus games for monthly fee. That 400 number is a little bit intriguing because Microsoft typically does not talk about how many games total there are in the Game Pass. Now, it's not that hard to figure it out, but they like to use more than 100 titles because, right, it does flux up and down, right? Every month, some games leave and every month they add some more. So it's not a hard and fast number. And also Xbox Game Pass, our Xbox Game Studios are dumping things into there. So the number does flux a little bit, but very clearly they're listing 400 here, which is likely the accurate number. So somewhere north of that, but I guess we could say less than 500. And so they're really, really looking at this growth and retention, which obviously the ABK $70 billion deal falls into. And then they move on over into that maximizing return. So this is where things start to get interesting. You can start to see how they do this because they said, look, we've already eliminated Xbox Live Gold. We're introducing potentially new first-party content, right? All those first-party games always dropping in. They already did their price increase to monetize the sticky users. Basically, if you're listening to this, a sticky user is, well, you is somebody who's going to continue to pay as long as the product exists. There is always going to be some loss or churn, as they call it in the industry, when you raise pricing. But yeah, Microsoft is starting to turn that little revenue dial on people who are not going to leave the service, especially now that Activision Blizzard is under the umbrella. But the big question du jour here is new options such as ad-supported tiers, tiers being plural. So what would this actually look like, right? It's pretty easy to surmise what it is. It's, hey, you watch an ad, you get a certain amount of time, maybe up to 15 minutes per ad. The question becomes is like, hey, are users going to accept something like this? And my honest answer is probably yeah, at least in some respect. I think on mobile, this will be much more accepted than, say, sitting down at your console, because you can already see the negative headlines. It's like Microsoft shoves more ads into Xbox. Well, what they're leaving out is like, hey, you can watch an ad and then get your free time. The question is, like, what is that conversion ratio? Is it an effective ad unit, right? Because it's one thing to have an ad, but if nobody's actually clicking through or buying the product or going to the website or anything like that, then it's a bad ad unit and Microsoft can't charge a premium to it. However, if they can effectively prove that, hey, we've got a captive audience, they are highly engaged with these ad units, this could be a very lucrative way for Microsoft to make a living. Now, the question becomes, does Microsoft want to become an ad giant? And yeah, we already know they do. They already are. LinkedIn, Bing, and all that good stuff. That's already a known quantity. But the question becomes is, do Xbox users want to become ad unit viewers at the end of the day? So most likely, if you're paying for Game Pass, I say most likely here that you would never see an ad. ad, right? That does not feel like what Microsoft is trying to do. What it feels like they would try to do is explore those fringes of like, okay, there's people who are Game Pass curious, if you will. And so by getting them time in, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, something like that, maybe they'll send a free AOL disk with 90 minutes of free internet access. If you get that reference, I'm sorry, your knees probably hurt. And we are of the same age. That being said, that is the thing that Microsoft looks to be going towards. And this all comes off of their investments in cloud gaming. We actually heard during the FTC trials, if you remember, Microsoft said cloud gaming isn't really working out the way they thought it would. They thought they would be able to put Xbox cloud gaming on 1 billion devices and get a whole bunch of people. And what they really realized is that people use cloud gaming mostly to kind of like dip their toes into games, especially on the console. It's like, hey, I want to try out this title before committing to download how many ever gigs it's going to be and however long that may take, depending on your internet connection. And they found that's a really effective way to trial games. Now, on the mobile side, they weren't as clear about what they're seeing from all their users. But however, if they could be like, hey, especially, and keep this in the back of your mind, in the back of your mind, Microsoft's trying to build a game store on mobile. Remember that. They've already talked about this. This is a known thing from Phil Spencer. He says, we're working with third-party partners and we're trying to build this game store. So keep that in the back of your mind when you hear ad-supported Game Pass, because a lot of people, myself included, you hear it and you're like, that doesn't feel great. However, if Microsoft can use that as an economic lever to get people into their Game Pass store, right, on Android or iOS, which we know is coming, we'll see where it lands first, maybe both at the same time, right? There's some things going on in the courts that really kind of need to manifest to allow Microsoft to do this in an effective way. But when you start to put it through that lens, that Microsoft could have an Xbox Game Pass store, whatever they're going to call it, the Xbox store, the game store, whatever, the name doesn't really matter. And they say, look, you can play any one of our 400 mobile games on your mobile device. All you got to do is watch this ad. You can watch this ad and you can play for 15 minutes, watch 2 ads, you get 30 minutes or whatever the conversion metric is, or you can pay $9.99 or whatever, again, the value is. And for Microsoft on a mobile device, again, keep in mind that we know that mobile users are more accustomed to seeing ads before content. This strategy could be a really serious economic lever to get Game Pass off the ground. And so, yeah, there's going to be a lot of interesting headlines when Microsoft does this. I think they would be crazy not to at least like trial it, right? They're definitely going to go to some markets, kind of like we saw with the Family Game Pass plan. There's various ways these things manifest and play out. We would definitely see them trial this. And then, does it work? And then they'd really adjust that, because you think about it, like 1 ad per 15 minutes, or if you go to 1 ad per 10 minutes, like where's the sweet spot that consumers really maximize their value? And the other tricky part too is Microsoft has to find a way to do inverse value, right? Like what is their loss to get that user into there, right? It costs them a certain amount of money to get people into this sort of a platform and model. And is it worthwhile? That will be the key one. Like, is this worthwhile to Microsoft to put all this effort to do these trials and ads and everything else? Or is it better spent just to do marketing demand gen and get people just to pay straight up $9 or whatever the value they decide for the Game Pass in the, on the mobile and model going forward? It's really, really interesting. This is much more in depth than I was originally thinking, which is why I spun up a video, because people are going to be like, it's just an ad. But not really. You got to keep that mobile game store within context, because that, my friend, makes this super interesting. And if you want to stay super connected to all things Xbox, make sure to keep it subscribed here, because the only BS on this channel is me.